one of the days I was like, I'm going to go all out, like on a major holiday. I think I processed like 250,000 UPCs in like 2 or 3 hours. And like, you just can't do that as an individual, as an OA seller. I like to make the analogy that like the reason I think Google and like Facebook are so powerful is because they have so much data. And whoever has the most data has the most choices, makes the best decision. What ended up happening is that I turned that 15% cash back into, I think it was like a 41% cash back equivalent on the redemption. The purpose is not to generate profit, that's a byproduct. The purpose is to generate the points and reset the cash as quickly as I can.
What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Side Hustle Experiment Podcast. Today we have Thomas Cruz. He's sold over $7 million on Amazon. He's all OA to prep, and we're just going to jam out. He's very into technology, scraping websites, stuff that I've never really even heard of. So let's get into it. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm super excited. If you want to go to web scraping right out of the bat, I can tell you about that if you guys want to get into it.
Yeah, it's kind of explain that type of thing because we haven't had anybody talk about that really on here, so I'm sure people will be curious.
Yeah, so I think the two things to ground it like into so you have a frame of reference. If you guys are familiar with Tactical Arbitrage or Nepeto, they functionally do what web scraping is, but I feel like they don't do it justice in that like it's too mass market and it's not like customized enough. And so if you guys do wholesale and you have a background with it, I'm sure you do, what ends up happening is the wholesaler generally gives you that price list that has the UPCs and the cost, which is great. But with OA, we don't have that as a luxury. So we have to go like one step back in the process to create that output. And so functionally what ends up happening is when a lot of people start their RA journeys, they're just like scanning barcodes if they're sourcing that way. And so what web scraping does is it goes to a website and it'll literally open every web page and use it's called Python is the language that I use. And it'll literally open every web page, grab out the UPCs and the cost, and create basically the same thing as a wholesale list, like a price list. And so from that point, to give you context, like Shop WSS, I don't know if I can do a demo for you guys if you even want to see it, but Shop WSS, I can get out 30,000 UPCs in about 45 seconds. And so for me, like I'm of the belief that if you're going to do OA, the end game of OA is web scraping, because that's where you want to automate it, because the choke point is lead flow. And you can hire VA teams and stuff to source, but that comes with its own problems, mainly like you're not going to be able to replicate the output of what a computer does because it's like tireless. And even if you could, they'd burn out. You get into other issues of having to manage a team and train them and stuff. And so with my setup is I have the output. My starting point is everything's matched with profit and sales rank and all that calculated already. And so now my VA takes that output and it'll vet it based on my buying criteria. I call it qualifying leads into purchases, because then it turns into an issue of you have to grab the data, then you have to process it, and then you have to interact with it. So it's kind of like 3 stages. It's not enough just to get the data. Because what ends up happening is once you start dealing with that much data, you're going to have a lot of waste. And by waste, I mean you're going to have stuff that isn't price stable, like it has bad setups, it's like meant to fail, or there's no velocity, or a mixture of the two. And so it's a matter of how to navigate that. And so like I created ways to be able to vet on velocity and price stability. And like I don't know anyone else that has done that. Like I know the skill sets out there is not that rare. Like from a coding perspective, it's just I haven't seen it married like into one person, like where it's a web scraper and an Amazon seller in one person. And so once you start doing that, it gets really gnarly. The other day I did like, because I'm in several Discord groups and stuff that like I just jam out and network. One of the days I was like, I'm going to go all out like on a major holiday. I think I processed like 250,000 UPCs in like 2 or 3 hours. And like, you just can't do that as an individual, as an OA seller. And so like, that's why ChatGPT came out like 2 or 3 years. That's how long they've been doing it. I personally don't have any coding background. I'm all self-taught. And so like my gift was, I'm old, I'm 38. If you remember the MySpace days, like people taught you how to do HTML and stuff. And so my skill set was basically being able to go to websites and be able to locate and identify where the UPC was, go over to ChatGPT and be like, hey, I found the data that I want. This is where it's at. Help me get it out. And like, that's the gap that ChatGPT bridged, because before there was a hard skill barrier, or like if you didn't know coding, like you weren't going to do this. And in the past, I had hired developers, which is fine. But what ends up happening is you have some weird byproducts in that if it ever breaks, you don't know how to fix it. If they don't give you the scripts and they quit, they take them with you. If you want to work now and they're not available, like you're just stuck twiddling your thumbs and it sucks. And so I think of it like a video game, or like on your character creation screen when you make your stats. Like I'm just gonna max my stat for sourcing. Like I'm gonna press the button until I can't go anymore. And that's what like the web scraping lets you do.
Yeah,
and so like it's completely like changed like the workflow and the process and everything, because that's one of the other byproducts of like sourcing sale items that that I don't, since I've been selling since 2014, a lot of the things you learn when you're sourcing is like chase the sale items, which is fine. But what ends up happening is when you're older, you have a higher like baseline of income that you need to maintain for like your lifestyle and stuff versus someone that's like 20 that has like smaller threshold. And so what happens is like the consistency of your income is difficult to like maintain, because if you try and replenish any of the sale items, the sale's going to be over by the time you try and replenish. You don't know if it's going to go on sale, when it's going to go on sale, how much more, if at all. And so the byproduct of that is you're constantly sourcing things over and over again. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's just kind of like you're reinventing the wheel. And I think that's one of the big upsides for wholesale, is that like you can replenish this stuff. And I think that's a trade-off. And that's like the holy, like the North Star, like you're shooting for wholesale. But with OA, if you get web scraping to just run all the numbers every sales cycles, like you eliminate that pain point, and like it's not an issue anymore.
And do you sell this to other people, or is this just, do you use this personal to yourself only?
I've been doing it heavily personal. I've been dabbling with like coaching people on like teaching how to do it from start to finish. I've done 12 people. It takes I do two 2-hour classes, and then it's 4 times. So like 8, let's see, 2 classes a week, and then there's 4 weeks. So it's like 8 calls, 16 hours, something like that.
Yeah, 16.
But yeah, but then I realized that some people aren't like that interested in the technical side of it. Some people are. And so then like now I'm dabbling with like selling leads lists, because I'm kind of trying to position myself like, hey, like you can hire the VA, train them and do all that stuff, and it has its own pain points. Or you can just pay me the money and like I'll give you all the output. And then that's kind of one of the problems with the leads list. Like they're so shallow and they get so saturated, but I'm producing like thousands of matches. And so since sales cycles happen every time, every week, and then you have every sites, your outputs are crazy. Like the chance for saturation is so low. And that's the other thing I realized that I've been doing this so long, is that 2 people can look at the same lead and come out with 2 completely different interpretations. Because what I was trying to do in the past was trying to curate it to my buying preferences. But since I'm FBA, I have like a different buying profile, because the environment I'm reviewing in today isn't the environment I'm going to run into or land into like 3 to 5 weeks out, because of all that logistics lead time I have to eat. And so like FBM people, if you can execute on day 1 of the sale, like you can get outsized profit, because the ASINs haven't had an opportunity to react to the lower sales price yet. And so if you can execute in that narrow window really quickly, you can do some gnarly setups and get lopsided returns. But with me, that's why, since I do FBA, I'm concerned about price stability, because my hope is that like it's not going to fluctuate, because I don't want to put myself in the environment. And so you can kind of see that on the Keeper graphs when you're reviewing it. But the way I get around it is I check the 30-day and the 90-day buy box average, and I calculate the profit based on the lower of those 2 values. Because like my philosophy is that if I'm going to enter a listing, I want to stack the upside so much in my favor, in that it has to erode or eat through like 30 to 40% ROI or more, and it has to fight through or fight against its historical average, and it has to eat through that. Like I try and only buy like on say 8% or higher cashback days, and it has to eat through that additional 8 to 10% cash back. And so the way I see it is like it has to go through all that just to put me at break even, and it has to go down that much further for me to lose money. And like the chances of that happening, that's a catastrophic loss on an ASIN. Like I just don't see that happening that often. So for me, it's all a matter of like positioning yourself correctly, so like your risk exposure is really minimized when you take like all these data points into consideration, because that's where like manufacturing margin and stuff comes into play. And like I'm processing so much data, the chances of someone like getting onto all of my listings is like really minimal. And then like you have to fight all that upside that's in your favor. And so that's why I like really love it as a business model, because like I think of the scaling process as that like you have to get all of your finance in place. I call it like liquidity. You have to get your lead flow, and then you have to get your labor. And once you have all 3, you can start being like gnarly, like scaling stuff, because then you have to go into systems and like management stuff. And that's kind of where like that's my choke point right now as an individual, like a manager, business owner. I need to train more VAs to like take the workload off of me.
Do you think this is the future of the OA stuff? I remember having a tweet about this at some point in the past.
Yeah.
I was like, eventually this stuff's all going to be like coded out, like to where the arbitrage will just be like who has the most efficient system there and who has the capital to deploy, and be like, okay, there's the sale, I'm going to wipe the whole website.
Yeah. That's what's gnarly. Like Kohl's and Puma, they both have their inventory levels to the number. And so when you have that data at your fingertips, you can stock out listings. This is assuming they're going to stay stocked out, because they can restock at any moment. There's no way for you to know that. But it puts you in a privileged position, because you can functionally close the door behind you and like maintain like a moat, so to speak. And so I like to make the analogy that like the reason I think Google and like Facebook are so powerful is because they have so much data. And whoever has the most data has the most choices, makes the best decision. And that's the position you want to be in when you just start grabbing data. Because now my skill set is more like, I want to set up as many websites as I can, because not every website's going to have like a big yield. It's just like, I'm going to run this. Oh, that's all I got. Okay, let me go to the next one. Let me go to the next one. And you want to just pick the best of the best, because now you can like, I like to make the joke that you either, because you can go at it a bunch of different ways. You can like go off of velocity, ROI, or raw profit. You just go through the list until you run out of money or you get bored. Like that's where you want to be. And like, I think that's it. That's the end game. And I know another seller. I don't know if you guys should interview him or not. Nick Spizak. He's a programmer by profession. That guy, like, I'm self-taught. Like that guy with no wonders I'll never know. But I'm just like school of hard knocks, and that's how I learned everything on the mean streets. But what I'm getting at is, I think what ends up happening is there's this weird like dead zone where you have the people that are coders by profession that command like 6-figure salaries or more, that have the skill set to do this, but they make so much in their day job, they're just like, why would I do that? And then you have like these regular dudes like me that don't know how to do it, that want to do it, but don't have the skill set to do it. And so like there's this, nothing's happening in that middle. And so being self-taught with ChatGPT let me fill that gap.
Yep. And it's so easy too. I have no coding experience, and I coded out something that would like scrape videos, like popular Instagram,
Yes.
and download them and redo them. And I like, dude, I don't even know how to use Python at all. And then just ChatGPT with an hour and a half, and I built this thing that somebody was charging $1,500 for on Twitter. And I was like, it's crazy how much you can do like that. I think people probably just don't even look into it. They think, well, it's way more difficult. But no, they just prompt you. Not, even if you don't even have a basic understanding, it'll tell you where to download Python, where to download these things, like every single bit of it. So that's awesome to use it like that.
It's incredible, because I like to think of like the ChatGPT is like the library 2.0. Like the library will talk back to you. Your only limitation is your ability to ask it questions. Like your imagination is literally the limit. For me, my biggest struggle was just coming up to speed with the vocabulary so I could ask with precision. And I didn't know what it was capable of, so like I didn't know how to ask it. But kind of like what you want to start out with, or like the progression that it works with, for me is like, I like
Said it before on the podcast. One of the biggest regrets was not outsourcing my Amazon business sooner. Hiring was a hassle, training VAs was even worse, and I put it off way too long.
Same here. And as you guys know, I'm lazy. I don't have the proper skills to hire and train employees. And me and John both came to a conclusion after interviewing over 70 people that outsourcing is a necessity to scale without massive headaches. So today we have partnered with Carter Maxwell and his VA Fastlane service. If I knew about this when I was on Amazon, I'd probably be selling still today.
If you're working a 9-to-5, have capital, but not enough leads, or just want to stop doing the tasks you hate, the VA Fastlane is 100% worth checking out. Carter has been on the podcast and he knows his stuff inside and out.
And maybe you have commitment issues. We all do sometimes. The good news is you can just try out the service for an hourly rate. So if you're tired of running a baby business, book a free call with Carter below and see if he can help you scale your business today.
day one would be like, hey, I'm trying to do this, and this is kind of the output I want. Is that possible? And then ChatGPT will be like, yeah, this is XYZ, do this. And then you try it. And then you just keep like, okay, let's add this feature, add this feature, add this feature. And before you know it, you have like 10 features on it. And then you have like, it's robust, and it can do, it's called like error handling. Like if it fails, it knows what to do. It can keep going.
You got John.
So do you think anyone could do this?
I think so.
If you think so, what would be the steps? So someone's like, I want to scrape, let's just say Kohl's. What would you suggest they do?
So for me, I think it's very similar to Amazon. Like when you're thinking of becoming a seller on Amazon, the first thing is just to believe that it's possible. If you can see it, like that's going to overcome like a lot of mental stuff, because you're just like, okay, it's possible. You know that like someone's able to do it. For me, if you want to go and try it, what I would suggest is go to Kohl's.com, pick up any link, because you need a direct link to load, and say like a Nike shoe. Take that link, and then take that link and go over to ChatGPT and be like, hey, I want to load this web page and output it's called view source. So if you ever right click view source and you saw the HTML, what's going to end up happening is I use a software called PyCharm that's free, and Python's the language that like runs on PyCharm. So you're going to need to do those two things, get them installed first. And so what ends up happening is you can say, hey, write me a script that'll load this page and output the view source, because you just want proof of concept to see that you can load the page. Because one of the issues is you're going to start fighting site security, because websites don't like being scraped. And so your first step is just to see if it'll talk back to you. because like if you can't manipulate it if you can't talk to you. So you ask it to load it, and then you're like, okay. Then the next step would be, and I walked someone through this, they were fascinated by it. You do Control F and you search for UPC. And the way it's set up is it's like UPC bracket ID and then the numbers there. That's the way Coles is set up. It's called JSON, JavaScript Object Notation. Just think of it like structured data. But what I'm getting at is if you tell it like, hey, this is how it's formatted, find me every instance where it's set up like this, and then output it in the console, which is like the print section. And so then like you just go from there. Your next steps are going to be like, because you have to accurately, the thing is with variations, you're going to get tripped up. So what you end up having to do is you have like item 1, price 1, item 2, price 2. So you have to figure out how to marry all that stuff together. You have to get the links to match together. You have to do stock checks and stuff. But like all that stuff's going to come in time, because like when I started doing it, is like I grabbed all the data, but I was like, hey, like some of this stuff's out of stock. Then you have to go back in there and be like, well, there's some type of, the website has logic that it's checking, and it's able to determine if it's in stock or out of stock. And so you have to do what's called reverse engineering and go in there and be like, oh, this is the like light switch, so to speak, I need to check. Like if this field is set to true, it's in stock. If it's false, out of stock. And you just tell ChatGPT, hey, if it's set to false, like don't put that as the output. And so it's just a lot of
this within ChatGPT.
Yeah.
Or do you have like have you cleaned it up and made it like a software you download?
No, everything's custom written. I have like a system or an outline of how it's supposed to progress, because a lot of it is like what you're expecting and what you get back. And it's like, oh, it didn't work how I thought. And then you'll just be like, hey, it didn't work XYZ. And then it'll try it again. And then once you get it to do what you expect it to do, it's like, okay, let's add a feature. Because the thing with ChatGPT is that it's not called, well, one of the things it can do is it can hallucinate. And it's gotten better at this over time, because I've been using it for like 3 years. But what ended up happening is you could have like 5 features and you're trying to add a 6th. It can forget like features 2 and 3. And like, here you go. And so that's why you want to only add one step at a time, because I think of it like a save point, where it's like, I know it worked up until this point. And if anything fails, you can go back to that and be like, hey, like you forgot steps 2 and 3, like add them back in. And like sometimes you'll catch them doing that. It's not supposed to do that and gets lazy, but like that's why you have to like walk it across the finish line. And that's the other reason why I only want to give it a little bit per prompt, because if you give it too much, it'll just like, it doesn't have enough direction. Kind of the same way in a VA, like you get out what you put in. And like you have to be really clear with your expectations and your output.
What about Cursor? Do you use any of that? I know that's something to do with like coding stuff, right? Or it helps.
Yeah. There's several other ones. I think Gemini, Cursor, Cloud, Sonnet. They're all different models. I haven't used them. I'm sure they're all equally as capable. I've just used ChatGPT because like that was the first thing I was introduced to, and it hasn't like failed me yet. But what ends up happening is over time, these models are getting updated and they're getting better and better over time. And so like their error rate goes down. And like more often than not, it's like human error. It's my fault. Like I didn't prompt it correctly.
Interesting. What else you got, John?
So what makes what you're doing different than what Tactical Arbitrage or like Nepedo is doing?
So what ends up happening, or where it shines brightest, I should say, is that when I'm scraping websites that they don't support, like that's where you want to be, because no one else will have access to what you have. I used Tactical Arbitrage back in the day. I'm hesitant to like frame this not in a negative way against them. I was sourcing like a toy from Target in the toy category, and I had been sourcing it for like a year, and I ran it through Tactical Arbitrage, and it was never included in the output. And I always scratched my head why it wasn't doing that, and I could never figure out what it was. And I'm willing to admit that it could have been human error on my part, because like I put like no ROI filters on it. I just wanted to see the matches and didn't see it. And so that led me to believe that either wasn't working as intended, or I was doing something wrong, or someone had told me at one point that some users will mark things as inaccurate matches to like get it pulled from the catalog as a match output to preserve it like as a hit internally for their own sourcing. And I was like, that's really like, I think Nepedo does something like that, but as a paid feature. And so I don't know what was going on in the background. But what ends up happening is like it's really slow. And the other part that I had a lot of issues was with, at least with Tactical Arbitrage, it's the only experience I've had, is that it put a lot of false positives out, like out of stock things. And so I felt like I was spending more of my time vetting things that were mismatched and out of stock. And it was like a big pain in the butt. And so like when I coded this, I knew to check for those data points, because like there's merit in chasing things that are out of stock, because then you could put like restock monitors. Like an easy example would be like when PlayStation and Xboxes came out, they're really hot. And I think it's Pokemon cards now. Like there's merit in chasing that stuff and setting it up, including in the output. But since I'm processing so much data, I'm kind of like, well, I just want to look at stuff that like I can buy now and execute on now. You can run an entirely different business on like just getting restocks too. I'm not set up for that, but like it has some interesting upsides.
But why have you not set up for the restock thing? Because those are the things that really command like huge returns a lot of times too. So you not thought like, that is probably somewhat to look at, right?
Yeah, those are really interesting from a concept perspective. I haven't built out for it. I love the idea on it because, like, by definition, if they're out of stock, the thinking is like there's demand behind them, causing them to be out of stock. I use one thing's called Distill. It's a free monitor. It's a web page monitor, and you just like you tell it, look at this price right here, and like if it changes, like this is more for like catching price changes. Like it'll alert you, or if it says out of stock, and if that phrasing text ever changes, it'll alert you like, hey, like this is back in stock. It's kind of elementary, like you don't need any code to do that, which is fine, like for ready to go people. But yeah, like that's a real big upside. One of the other things that another friend of mine that I scrape with, or like when I was like learning how to do it, we would do what's called reactivating ASINs that were dead, meaning like they went to 0 offers. And so it ends up being really interesting because like it can be 1 day out of stock or like 10 days out of stock. Because the problem you start having is like when it's 100 days out of stock, you have less like sales history or reference. But the thinking is if you could run the stuff that matches to an ASIN, what happens on the profit calculation side is that there's no buy box and there's no listing price. So it can't calculate profit because there's no listing. And so you look at the data point for the 30 or the 90-day buy box average that you get from Keepa, and you calculate the profit off of that. And then at least like if I reactivate this listing, this is going to be the profit, like kind of like a ballpark profit. Because what ends up happening is when you're the only one commanding the listing, you can jack the prices up. But the problem with that is that like you only have a narrow window of execution until like seller number 2 sees you doing that and it comes onto the listing, and then the price will come back to like equilibrium and stuff. But if you're constantly doing that, you can get some like popped off results because like this thing's stocked out and you bring it back to market and you're just killing it.
It's funny you mentioned that. I don't think I've ever brought this up anywhere, but that was something I made a lot of money doing on different
Yes.
colors of stuff and different shoe sizes or clothing sizes. Like you would just, when you clicked on the thing, there would not even be a medium, for example. But if you went into Keepa's in and you pull up the parent variation, you can find
Yes.
that one. And you can usually price it like 50, 100% higher. Because
Yeah.
somebody's looking for that thing, it's just not available. Yeah, that's a good.
It makes for a really interesting play. It gets tricky because like the sales history turns off because I always try and look backwards to anticipate what's going to do again forward. But if there's nothing to reference, it's like hard to determine that. But I think that's what the risk profile you're putting yourself into is that like you don't know what's going to happen, and that's why your profits are outsized because you're exposing yourself in the hope that like there's still velocity behind this. Because I think the other thing is too that some of the buyers will have restock alerts. Like on Keepa, like they'll have price monitors and they'll be like, oh, it restocked, and then you'll get that initial wave of people that'll pop the listing. And so like that's really nice because you're like, hey guys, like I'm back, and then they come in and they take it.
So how much money are you spending? Like what do you have where this is all, set up like automated? Are you looking to spend X amount per day, or do you get on there and see just what's available? Like how is your mental going into this stuff of like how many products you're buying a day?
So for me, I always try and run it on day 1 of the sale. Ideally, you run it within the first hour because the thinking is you're going to have the greatest amount of choice before anyone's had an opportunity to like go through the website. Say if it's a 7-day sale, yes, you could run it every of the 7 days, but what ends up happening is you're reviewing the same leads. You can get it to isolate like, hey, we haven't seen these yet, and focus it on those. But I'm kind of the opinion that like stuff's probably not going to restock. I haven't tried it. It's just like what I suspect. But like day 1, you want to run it and you take the best of everything. One of the things that I've started doing now is I don't know if you guys are familiar with Rakuten paying out in American Express points. Yeah. I started doing that now, and like you're getting really lopsided. I did a write-up because I think they just came off of that 15% cash back week. What ended up happening is that I turned that 15% cash back into, I think it was like a 41% cash back equivalent on the redemption. And so when you have the scraping data, you can intentionally chase things. I read Wall Street Bets on Reddit, and they call themselves degenerates, and I laugh every time because like I'm enough of a degenerate to buy things that have high velocity that might have like say 8 to 12% ROI just to farm the cash back because I can get the spend behind it and get the cash back. Granted, I'm going to have that price stability on my side to like absorb, because from a probability standpoint, you're opening yourself to risk exposure that it turns against you. But if I do my job right, like the chances of that happening are very minimal. But if that does happen, I'm going to capture it on the back end with the travel on the redemption side that I'm just like, I'm not going to really care because like the upside's so big. To give you an example, I had $800 of American Express points that are redeemed for $2,500 of 2 first-class flights. And it's just like, dude, that's a nuts redemption. And like, if you have the data to access and like execute on those plays, it's just another tool in your tool set or your arsenal to execute on. Because I have the saying that like every ASIN serves a different purpose. And for those purposes, because sometimes the margins, like, just kind of like you're dismissive of it, it's on the fence, but it suits the function of farming cash back very well. And I'll use it for that purpose. Obviously, you'd love to make just raw profit altogether, but like if you have excess capital and you want to deploy it in something, like that's a perfect vehicle to use because it's just like right there.
Yeah, and what kind of stuff are you looking for? Like, for example, on something like that? Because I remember when I was winding down my Amazon business altogether, I started thinking about that type of thing of like, what can I farm like cash back for, really? And you have the credit card side as well, so you have like your credit card and the other stuff. So, what kind of stuff are you looking at there? Because I had trouble finding it, but obviously, I was not scraping and doing that kind of thing.
For me, because one of the data points that Amazon introduced recently when they started doing a competitive price threshold and express buy boxes, they did number of sold. And I think that had to do more with that low inventory metric where like they penalize you if you do too little. I think they introduced that metric as a forerunner to tell you like use this metric to accurately like stock this ASIN. But anyhow, that didn't exist back in the day. But now that it exists, like the problem we had prior to that data point was that we didn't know if there was velocities on every ASIN. And so if you have that data point up front, like you don't even have to bother like checking like velocity because it's there. It's giving us the data point from Amazon. And so for me, when I'm buying, I'm trying to look for like the highest number I can. I do some office supply stuff that sells like 5,000 units a month. Obviously, I'm not getting all those units, but you want to be on listings like that because too, as like a novice sellers and stuff. And one of the things I like to say is like, if you know the listing's selling 5,000 a month, it's not scary to buy like 500 units because like it has the capacity to sell that. But the other reason it's useful is that like you can buy like super deep on it. And from a logistics perspective, for anyone that's doing like self prep, it's so much faster to do like 100 units of the same item than like 10 units of 50 different items because it's just a big pain in the butt. It's like, I think in manufacturing, they call it retooling. Like there's like a tear down like prep time cycle you eat. And so for me, I'm just like, let's just go in and go out. Like that's the sole function I want to do. I just want to get in, get out. The purpose is not to generate profit. That's a byproduct. The purpose is generate the points and reset to cash as quickly as I can. Because the other thing is too, is if you're compounding, like I think if you compound 10%, like 100% reinvestment, 0% returns, and you like put everything back in, I think like 8 compounds of 10%, something lopsided. It's like 100% or something. Like it's nuts. And so I think that's like the beauty of wholesale, or my suspicion is that you get a lot of velocity at lower ROI. But like for me, I'm kind of like, if your little pot of money like adds up to 100,000, personally, like I don't care if that's like 10% or 50% ROI. Like it's still 100 grand. Obviously, like for the flexing and like, yeah, I made 100% ROI, it'd be great. But like if I'm still getting that pot of cash, like I'm cool with it, you know?
Yeah, definitely. What else you got, John?
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting how you're just like going about sourcing. And what do you think about? So, are you going more deep versus wide?
I do both. Yeah. Because usually I like the velocity. The velocity is the preference because what ends up happening is your data set split into two. If you have that data point for number bought, the cutoff's 50, and it's a bracket of 50 to 99 for that bracket. So you source anything from there, and then the problem is the data points that don't have that, I'm sorry, the ASINs that don't have the data point, they're selling between 0 and 49 units a month. There could be velocity from them, but the problem is from like a labor perspective, you have to go in there and do your due diligence and stuff. And kind of the joke I like to make is it's hard to build a business around things that sell like 5 times a month. You could do it, but you're going to go really wide in the process. It's nice in that your risk exposure is that like one, like if the ASIN goes south against you, it's not going to bankrupt you, but it's also not going to give you financial freedom. It's a big pain in the butt. And for me personally, like repricing 100 ASINs is like a terrible way to live. I hate it. And so I'd much rather like reprice 10 ASINs or like, you know, the fewest amount possible. And so for me, it's just like, I'm always of the opinion too, like I want to spend my money on anything and everything until I find something better to replace it with. Because if you have any capital that's not being deployed, like deploy it somewhere so you can compound it.
And what's your AOV or like average sale ASP, right, on this kind of stuff? What I'm thinking is it's like sub $25, but with the prep center and that stuff, it's probably not that low, right?
Yeah, so I actually try and do shoes more because I like a lot of people hate on shoes and it comes with its own pros and cons. But I like the shoes because generally your cost is like anywhere from like 30 to as high as like 100 per shoe. But what that allows you to do is that like it's a lot easier to spend a lot of money buying $100 pairs of shoes than like a $5 beauty product. you can achieve the same result with the quantity being your multiplier. But like one of the things that a friend of mine, Ambrose, he's an older dude, and I loved him for this. He was talking about like a lot of people will sell socks because they have a lot of velocity, but their profit can be kind of thin, like say $3 or $4. He mentioned that he does everything self prep, and he's like, if I can only prep 100 units a day and it makes $3 profit, like, and he can't produce any more like output, he's like, the only lever I have left to pull is to increase my profit per unit. And so his thinking was, I'd much rather sell 10 shoes at $30 profit each than 100 socks at $3 profit each. And now he still has 90 more units that he could potentially, like in theory, process and add on. And so for me, like, I like getting the stuff that costs more because I think what ends up happening is inexperienced sellers are hesitant to spend a lot of money into a single ASIN. And so what I ended up realizing was that like when you look at it strictly from an ROI perspective, like it's the same number. It's just like your cost is different, but your ROI percentage is the same. And so once I removed that like as a roadblock, I was just, oh, like people are scared. And like the byproduct of that is that there's going to be fewer people on the listing and they're going to be more established, meaning like they're more likely to play nice because they understand like not to mess with it. And the other thing with shoes is that like a $1 profit fluctuation will only affect like the ROI by like 5 or 10%. But if your profit margin is like $3 and it goes down $1, like that's a 33% reduction in your margin. And so it gives you like far less breathing room. Like it's a lopsided result that you're putting yourself in. It can work, but I don't like that risk exposure. And it's gonna come down to your buying preference. And then the other thing too with shoes, the return rate historically, I think for me was around 12 to 13%. I opted into the Amazon refurbishment setting. And so what they end up doing is they intake it. They're supposed to clean it and like put it back in a new box and like add it back to your inventory. Because one of the things I didn't realize too was that this all came over like the past 3 or 4 years have been in shoes. But what ends up happening is I thought initially if you sold something for $10 profit, what would happen on a return is they take the $10 profit and you reset to zero. But when I looked at the numbers, like that's not the case. You lose that profit because it zeroes out, and then you pay like $12 to $15 in fees. I call them unrecoverable fees. Since I do everything FBA, what ends up happening is they keep the fulfillment fee because technically they ship the item to the customer, and so you're not going to refund that because they perform the service. And so this comes into play with like your profit minimums. I think Sadiq has like a really high, like obviously higher ROI thresholds is better, but like at a minimum for shoes, if you can do it, I say 12.30 because I think of it as a time. I say $12 profit and 30% ROI as a minimum. Because the thinking here is that like you want one profitable sale to mostly cancel out one refund. Is like the thinking as a baseline. Because otherwise what was happening is like one refund would cancel. I was selling sandals for like $5 profit, and I didn't realize that like one refund wiped out like 3 profitable sales. And like if you lose the cost of the item and you eat the $15 profit, you wipe out like 7 sales. And if you're not aware of that, like you'll die. Like it hurts. But the other thing with shoes is that like I love the cashback.
I felt that pain with that. But then there's a lot of it like the thing I liked about it is this the high velocity on certain things. I'd say these are not profitable, so I don't mind to talk about them here. But I remember white Air Force Ones back when Nike
Yeah.
jacked the retail up. You could buy those for $80-$90 and just sling them for $150-$160 all day. And if you could get your hand on 1,000 pairs, you could sell 1,000 pairs. Are you looking for stuff like that still? Of those, I know I don't want to mention anymore because you might be selling them, but a lot of those high velocity like that maybe you already kind of know where it's going to be and how fast it sells.
What I'm seeing in my buying purchases is that like it feels like the higher the profit goes, like the lower the velocity goes. And so like the way I'm compensating for that is just buying shallower, like 3 to 5. It's not going to I'm not going to sell that much, but like there's some shoes that I'll sell for like $30, $40 profit, and it's gnarly, but like the velocity is not there, which kind of sucks. But there's like hype shoes and stuff that'll do that, and it's crazy. But you have to go in there and make sure that like the due diligence is there. Because a lot of stuff, like, yes, it's listed. I like to use eBay as an example. Like, yes, it's listed at that price, but is it selling at that price is my issue. And that's why I like looking at the data to see that there's sales at specific prices. Because I want to know that, like, there's buyers here at this price point. Like, if I need to exit in a hurry, like, I can see it on the graph reflected in there. That was the other thing I was going to mention, too, with shoes. I came from a toy background from Toys R Us days. And, like, I would send in Barbies and Funko Pops. And, like, if you looked at it wrong, like it would get damaged and like customers would be like, I don't want this. But with shoes, they're like functionally indestructible. Like they'll get to the customer, and they don't have that other issue with like grocery where they'll expire. The box may get messed up, but like I like that from like the uniformity standpoint on the prep side, because you can do like 8 shoes per box on the larger shoes, and like the fact that it's durable and it's going to survive. That was really attractive to me from like switching from toys anyway. But then you get that like 10 to 15% return rate. But like if you know that going in and you position yourself accordingly, and that's why I try and do it with like 10% cash back days or higher, I'm going to absorb that. Like that's fine. Let's do it.
Yeah. Well, you said you had some stuff written down that you wanted to talk about, so I don't want to ask any of the wrong questions. It feels like your knowledge is so big and all this stuff. You probably have better things to talk about than we could even ask. So, what kind of stuff do you have in mind?
One of the things I wanted to mention was 55 days of 0% interest for like the people that are starting out. I guess as a pretext to that, someone had written, and I forget who did a tweet about it, but it had to do with bankroll and impact. But what I was getting at was that like sometimes you might only have like $10,000 to spend, and you'll feel like discouraged because you're competing against someone that has 100,000 to spend. But the analogy I like to make is that like if that person that's spending 100,000 is buying 10% ROI stuff, they're gonna make 10 grand in profit. But that $10,000 budget, the tricky part is going to be if you can buy everything at 100% ROI, you'll also make $10,000 profit. But the takeaway is that like you can have the same budget impact as a $100,000 person. The trick is like, are you able to get that ROI at scale? And so what ends up happening is like as soon as when you exhaust your budget, like the lever you have left to pull is to increase your ROI per purchase because you have no more capital left to deploy, and that's like your offset. But the thing I wanted to mention was that you can do 55 days of 0% interest because the way credit card statements work is that they give you 29 days or 30 days, something like that. But what ends up happening is if you spend it on the first day of your cycle, you're not going to see it until like 2 cycles out instead of 1 cycle. And so what ends up happening is like, I think of it as like you're juggling balls in the air. Like I want to have my money up in the air for as long as possible and hold on to it for as long as I can before I have to pay it back. And so like if you intentionally time your statement dates, like you can get 55 days of 0 interest is like your max. And I think it works on the plum. So it ends up being like 90 days of 0% interest. Because what ends up happening is if you pay your statement balance in full, you don't pay any interest on the balance. And so like what ends up getting really clever is if you have 4 cards, now you can spread that full balance across 4 cards, because if you get your disbursement every 2 weeks and you're like, you're going to come up short and not be able to pay off the balance, you can intentionally like time it. So like, I'm going to eat the interest on this card, but I'll pay off the other 3. And so like, you're going to reduce your interest rate by a ton if you position yourself accordingly. Like, I want it to be on that one. Obviously you don't want to pay an interest if you can, but like it gives you that luxury once you start thinking about it. I have the 2% Capital One cashback card, the green card. It gives me 2% cash back. And like, just for sake of math, if it's 24% APR, what ends up happening is that's 2% APR per month. And I kind of see it as like, well, if I eat 1 month interest, the 2% will cancel it out. So I'm like, I'm not technically negative until like the 2nd month cycle. And so if I do that 55-day cycle thing on top of that, I'm not negative until like 90 days or something like that. And so what ends up happening is like you can leverage yourself so much more efficiently when you do that. And like, I haven't seen anyone talk about that. And it's something like anyone can do.
Yeah, I know. I used to be in arbitrage ops, and they talked about that stuff sometimes. And another thing, if you don't want to do it a lot, but you could just ask for an extension too, which like a lot of credit card companies will grant.
Yeah, but that's gnarly. That's good to know.
Yeah, I got like a 15 or 30 day, one of the two extensions. I didn't even need it in hindsight, but I was just scared that I wouldn't be able to pay it and didn't want to pay the interest. Yeah, and then they just pushed it out, especially if you're somebody who pays your stuff off really well.
Yeah, that's a big thing. I think Steven does business was talking about that. Like if you do those big payments, like when you start going to like apply for larger increases of credit lines, like they'll give it to you. That was the other thing too that I liked as a byproduct of farming points, is that like you'll pump your revenue numbers. And like the two byproducts of that is, one, like you get more opportunities for feedback on your account, but 2, on the credit side, it might look stupid on your books bringing in like high single digit ROI, but when you apply for credit, your revenue is going to be higher, and the bank's going to be like, oh, this guy's moving money. You're going to win on that side with a higher credit limit, even though in the interim you're not really doing anything except farming the points.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So when you started the business, were you what made you start actually?
Well, man, I don't think you guys know this. I worked with a band manager for Guns N' Roses for like 3 years. I was his personal assistant.
Really?
That was a really fun gig. That was during COVID times. Well, it ended up happening at the time in 2014. I was a dispatcher at a propane company, but the mindset I had was like I was getting by but not ahead, and I was just like, this sucks. And then like I did Toys R Us for a few years, but then they went bankrupt, and then that's when I joined Guns N' Roses as a personal assistant thing. But I had always stayed with Amazon. And whenever I had like a bad mental day, I was like, man, why am I working for someone else? Like when you know how to make money for yourself, you're just like, dude, I'm gonna split. And I finally like reached my breaking point. I was like, okay, I got my fill. There's always problems to solve. It's never going to be done. Like, I'm just going to do my own thing. And so then like I ended up getting an SBA loan for $267,000 during the whole pandemic thing. And the interest rate is 3.5% for 30 years. And I was like, this is nuts. Like the failure rate for small businesses is like 90% in the first 5 years. Like, why would they give me a 30-year loan? And so like during COVID, and stuff, like I was scared to go out. And so I was like, I got to do OA. And I joined a coaching group. And like it exposed me to like the manufacturing discounts in the community and stuff. But like it's a scraping that was just like supercharged me because
And
I
you
just
do it
like stared
full-time?
at the screen. Okay.
Are you full time doing what, like OA, or do you have it's like another job on the side?
No, this is full time. I love doing this. Yeah, I have a blast of this. What
Yeah,
was I gonna
and
say?
I feel like what we've talked about today and like all this stuff is kind of the only long term solution to a lot of people. I know a lot of people are struggling with the OA and the RA and all that stuff right now. But like the only way to make it more efficient over time where you're not working like 80 hours a week to make a little amount of money is to automate this stuff. Like if you can't figure out how to do this, you can't figure out the coding to some extent. I don't know, long term, you're just going to get eaten alive by people like you who are figuring that stuff out.
Yeah. That's what I realized. And I don't mean this in a negative way. The first hurdle is just to know that it exists and it's possible. But like the negative thing I was gonna say was that like the marketplace isn't fair and you're competing against people that are playing like on like level 50 on like you're on level 2. And that's okay. Like that's gonna come in time. But like the important thing is to know that like it is possible. And even then, like there's such an abundant amount of leads out there that no one has enough money to deploy and be everywhere. In the 3 years I've been doing this, I've processed, I think, 44 million UPCs. Like there's just so much data and everyone buys differently. So like the risk profiles, like the chance of overlap, like if all three of us look at the same leads list, like we're not going to buy the same stuff. And even if we do, the depth is going to vary as well. And even on top of that, like you might FBM, I might FBA. I might buy and hold, you might not. And so like there's so much variance going on. And I think when you're newer, it's hard to believe that there's that much abundance out there. And when you're on my side, you see it, you're like, holy crap, like, let me just add another website. And then you have sales cycles churning every week. There's just so much data coming in. It's nuts. Nuts.
So with your web scraping, then I'm gonna guess, do you have like a bazillion leads and just not enough capital to buy them?
Yeah. So like I know my choke point. This is gonna sound like a total first world problem, but I don't like buying stuff. And I need to train a VA to do it. Like tinkering, like I love tinkering and admin, and I hate buying. So like that's my choke point, is just executing. Like I love talking about the theory.
Why are you struggling to outsource the buying part? Because it seems like your data. I think most people struggle to outdo the buying part because it's very. I would buy this because I see this. Like it's almost hard to outsource your brain why you would buy something versus not buy something. But it seems like your data is so drilled in, and it's all being done by a computer that you don't really run that risk of them buying the wrong stuff because like the data is so good.
Yeah. I think for me, it's kind of like giving someone access to my wallet, like messes with me in my head. And like, that's my choke point as an individual. I need to let go because I'm not going to, that's like my next ability to scale is like adding more people and letting them take over the process. Another star, Ian, I love him to death. He's like, Tony, you've leveraged everything you can with your existing tool set. Like there's no more like juice you can squeeze out. Like you need to introduce people. And like, I know this academically, but doing it is like, it's different. Because I always like to say, like, just because the work needs to be done doesn't mean that I need to be the one doing it. And that's like where the VAs come into play.
Yeah. Do you have any right now or just you?
Yeah, I have one. And so I just have them look at the leads and be like green light or like pass is kind of like the idea. And then I'll take those. And so my starting point is like stuff's already like vetted, so to speak. And then I'm like, okay, let's buy these, let's buy those and stuff.
We just got a sponsorship for the podcast about a VA service, so this is a perfect time to segue in here.
Yeah,
Somewhere.
do it. Yeah.
Put the ad in here about now. But it's funny. I mean, we both struggle with the same thing. I think a lot of people do, and it's a whole different skill set. Like all these things, it's not like if you're good at one thing, it overlaps. Like managing people and hiring the right people and like keeping them motivated and stuff. That is its own thing, and it's very difficult, in my opinion.
I think I saw a thing from Dan Martell. He wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. I love him to death. He did a quote about something like when you're scaling, and the way it applied to Amazon was like your first 100K of revenue to like test your ability as an individual and your skills. Like your next tier of growth is going to test like your systems and like your ability to communicate and convey that to your VAs and stuff. And so I'm kind of like there, like the skill set's there, it's developed. Now I have to like learn how to communicate and be an effective manager and stuff. And like that's the choke point for me. But like I'm cognizant of it's there, but like doing it in theory is different.
Yeah. So a question I thought about this: what is the most efficient way in the future for you to take this skill set you have and grow it? So like obviously you could grow your Amazon business, but that requires more and more capital and more risk exposure as time goes on. You could build this as like a prettied up software and sell it, or you could partner, I guess, with larger sellers that don't have they have too much capital and they don't have enough ability to get enough leads or whatever. So have you thought about that, of like what's the big future thing for you and where it all goes?
I would like the idea of selling the leads list as like as a group thing, like a subscription model, because the recurring revenue sounds really nice as a concept. But I don't like that there's kind of a ceiling on that. I like the idea of the coaching model. There's technically no ceiling, but then you're introducing the competition into the marketplace. But then you'd have to have like a higher price point to like try and keep it confined. But the other thing is too, the people that are clever can run their own leads list groups or teach other people too. But I think it comes back to like that abundance mindset, is that like the chance of overlap is still really small. You're just not going to like buy the same stuff. And like people have technical limitations. Like they're just not interested in putting up like 16 hours of like education time or the capital outlay for it. But like I've seen what some of the coaches have done in the space in terms of numbers. It seems really attractive because it's just like straight profit. There's no inventory overhead, returns to deal with. You're outside of the Amazon ecosystem. So in that sense, it's really attractive to me. And it reminds me of that saying, like you sell the shovels during the gold rush. Like I want to sell the shovels now.
Yeah, I mean, that is the move. And I will say the recurring stuff does sound really good. But if you think about it, let's say you're doing a coaching program and it's $5,000 and you have a software that's $100 a month. Wouldn't you rather just have the $5,000 one time than try to get the $100 for what is that, 50 months straight, which is, you're never going to do that, right? That'd be a huge retention time. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of people love the recurring, sound of it, but it's like high ticket is just going to beat that.
Yeah.
Because you get the
I had a friend that did that, and I thought of that. Like at month 51, he'll come ahead, but like if he doesn't make it to month 51, like you're gonna come under.
Yeah, and you're never gonna, if you can retain someone for 4 years,
Yeah,
that's ridiculous.
it's not gonna happen. Yeah,
Well, I also saw another stat that said I think most new Amazon sellers quit after 6 months.
yeah,
Like the
and
numbers aren't even in your favor to get to 50.
Yeah, that's true. That's
So
true.
low on that if they're only going to last 6 months, and probably those first 3 months they're not buying software.
Yeah, it's really discouraging, and I understand why they fizzle out, because like the turnover time is like almost 3 months on like FBA. Like day one, you spend the money, you don't get it back till like way later. And for a lot of people, this is their first business, and there's just an overwhelming amount of things and systems. Like if you're not committed to the process, like you're gonna fizz out. And I've seen that ebb and flow, and it makes me sad because like people generally want to do this, but they think they just get in over their head. But like that's any business, right?
Yeah. But you do have if you turned it into a software, whether it was like web-based or something people could download, then they just like put links into it and it generates like responses. I mean, you could sell that to someone for a lot, right? I mean, that would be the thing there, is you could have some massive valuation.
Yeah, I'm thinking of that's the play, because I think that scales so much better. There's just so much data. Like the arbitrage is there. And now with Walmart opening up as an additional like marketplace, like that same list of UPCs and costs can be applied to the Walmart platform. I don't sell on Walmart, so I'm not familiar with how it would look, but like the concept's there. Infrastructure's there to support it.
So, well, I have another question on the scraping thing. This is what always I found difficult. And I used OA X-ray and I used another one, but I never used the big ones. But my problem was with the images sometimes didn't match up or that type of thing. It's not always clean on Amazon's side to that. And you could miss something huge if maybe there's a little mismatch there. It's like, well, that could have been all the money you needed right there, but you didn't see that because the UPCs weren't aligned, or maybe the pictures didn't look the same. How do you combat that stuff? Or do you just mostly worry about the UPCs?
So there's some trade-offs that you make, and that's one of the big ones, in that what's supposed to happen in the Amazon product catalog is that every ASIN is supposed to have a UPC attached to it, but that's not always the case. And so what ends up happening on the scraping side is that if there's no UPC to match to, it's functionally invisible to me. I will never match against it. Two, the other issue is that some people will do nefarious things and use like an Adidas UPC for a Nike item if they're like gated, and they use that as a way to bypass the gating requirements. But what ends up happening on the scraping side is it'll technically match, but then you'll see like a red shoe and it's a brown shoe. And that's going to happen. That's going to be like a byproduct because the computer doesn't know any better. It's a legitimate match. We're going to catch that as humans, but in terms of like frequency of that happening, it's probably less than like 1% of the listings. The other trade-off you're making too is and this is why I do it specifically, is one, match quality. If everything's working as it's supposed to, like the match quality is going to be the highest threshold possible, because tactical arbitrage also searches on title, but then you get the problems where it's all fuzzy and you spend too much time like this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And so with UPC, the match quality is going to be the highest theoretical like it can be. And then on the account health side is if you have to fight off inauthentic complaints, counterfeits, or anything, you have the UPC matching to the catalog. And like your paperwork is rock solid. And so I really like that because like this is my livelihood and I'm not willing to like put on a 3-button shirt onto like a 5-button shirt listing type stuff. And the other thing is that you're processing so much data that you're not going to even notice that you're not matching to like some of these. And if you're that determined to like milk all the value out of it, you can rabbit trail off the leads list, because sometimes you have it where like Air Force One like has like 6 listings. Like you can figure it out like that way too, because it'll say like other people buy this or whatever, and you can make the visual matches. But I don't like it on the account health side. Like if the UPC doesn't match, like I'm terrified. In the 10 years I've been doing this, 11 years, I've never had a section 3. And I don't know if it's because I've been doing this so diligently or just been lucky. But like, I just want my paperwork to like be behind me, is like the whole premise to doing it this way. And not only that, is like the other problem with, there's sites that don't have UPCs, like Adidas.com doesn't have UPCs. And so like, I can't touch it. Like, yes, it sucks, but like there's so many websites that do have UPCs. If I'm determined, what I can do is I can output the entire Keepa catalog, which includes the model numbers, and then marry it to take off the model numbers from Adidas, marry them together and match it to the ASIN. If I'm determined, I can do it. But like, I'd rather not do that because like, I'm not familiar with Adidas as a brand, and I'd rather just focus on UPC. But like, you can do it, like for sure.
Yeah, I was going to ask, are there any websites that are particularly hard to do this with or impossible? And then what are the easier ones?
Oh my God. Shopify websites are the easiest. They have like no site security. Like Shop WSS, I kind of want to show you guys what it looks like in real time, because you're like, this is BS, man.
If you can share, do it. I think it'd be fine. Wouldn't it be fun, John? Do you think?
I think so. I don't see why not.
Yeah, do it. If people are watching this, then yeah, they get to see this, or pull it up if you're watching on Spotify.
Oh, I'm gonna do the super zoom.
There we go.
Oh, there we go. Can you guys see?
Yep.
I'm a fan of Arcane, the series. That's Jinx on my background. Let's do ChatGPT. These are all the websites I have like set up. Let's do Shop WSS. I intentionally did this one because it's fast. What ends up happening with Shopify websites is that they're all text-based, and the computer doesn't care about, I'm going to run it. You're going to see the results in real time. So it has to go through 91 pages. It's grabbing all the UPCs and prices right now, real time. It's done. And so this is the output. Let's go all big. Go to the bottom. 29,000 UPCs, real time. Like that's what you're up against.
Yeah. And then how do you match this along with the Amazon stuff when you get to this point?
So I ended up taking this file and I have to upload it to a website called ScanUnlimited, because that's what's going to do all the pairings to like UPC and stuff. Like Amazon. It's basically going to Amazon with every UPC and be like, hey, do you have this UPC? Cool. Here's the ASIN and like give me the numbers. Let me show you the dashboard. So I've had 45 million doing this process. This is everything in like my workflow. You can see the amount of lines I'm processing. But to give you an idea, if you want to see like what I'm doing, I have to apply a filter because I want the columns to be in a specific order, like 1, 2, 3, 4. But like I'll show you if you want to see it all. Like you're gonna laugh. Like this is my first world problem, because what ends up happening is the data is in here and I can't manipulate it. So like it's not a good place to work in. Let me do this. So I have another script that'll basically rearrange all the columns and like do make it all pretty basically.
People that have watched this far, they're like, I can't figure this out.
This is like a lot of lines of code, like thousands of lines of code. But this is why you want to do it, because like this is my idea of working hard. So it went through that list that we just generated. It deleted 781 of them because like it was below 0% ROI or had brands I don't want to deal with. Keepa has data points that I need that aren't available in ScanUnlimited, so I'm going over here to grab them. I can get it through the API, but what ends up happening is it's like really expensive. And so like those are the only 2 inputs I need. I just need to give it the 2 raw input files. And then it's going to be like, okay, move column 1 to column 4, highlight this row, blah, blah, blah. It's doing this all in real time. So I have 7 scripts that go through. Each script is like 100 lines of code.
Jeez.
And so this is the final output. I'm going to rename it 520. And so then this is the output. I'll take that off. So now I have everything calculated. ASIN, I have profit, I have ROI, I have that number sold column. I have the ratings to know if like this has like 3% of the ratings. The thinking is it gets 3% of the sales. So that's kind of like a getaway to forecast velocity. I can tell if it's a buy box or suppressed. I have the competitive price threshold markers. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Things can get suppressed buy boxed. And so this is the number where the buy box will turn back on or off, depending if you're over or under it. So if I want to reactivate the buy boxes on these listings, I can, and I can see the numbers where it would lead me when I do that. And then it's just like, I'll have the links and, oh my God, that thing's out of stock. Oh, it's because this is old data. So yeah, I have the source, I have the thing, I have to do my due diligence, 6.5, and then you just run the numbers. I think you're just going through this and then it's like, until you get bored, you run out of money. To give you context, I think it was processed 29,000 UPCs and only 95 came out above 10% ROI. And so the reason I bring it up, because it's discouraging when you're a new seller. And so the thinking is, if only 95 came up as an output, like your chances of getting it as a hit rate is like a third of 1%. And like, that's kind of the reasons why like it's so hard to find stuff. It's hard, man.
Yeah, I never looked at it like that. Yeah, if you're trying to manually do it, yeah, you're looking for like a needle in the haystack, literally, when this is, giving you right in front of your face.
That's always funny too, because a lot of the info you'll hear, you'll be like, "Whoa, there's 29,000 things on WSS. Like you just gotta work harder. You gotta go through more things." But it's like the reality is,
Yeah, it's pretty bleak.
it's not even 1% of the stuff on that site
Like
would be sellable.
the other aspect of it is like you need to know all your manufacturing margin, like all the discount mechanisms, the coupons, the gift cards, and all that stuff. Because once you have that, I like to use the analogy of if you're reviewing 100 items at straight cost, and you're paying sales tax, only like 5 to 10 of them might be worth considering for purchase. But if you learn how to get like just for sake of discussion, like a 20% off gift card, and now like your cost is 80 instead of 100, now suddenly like 30 items are worth considering. And so that's like your step 1 is figuring out the manufacturing margin. So this with Rack Room Shoes, like look at all the data here. There's 5,900 output results. And that's because they have a BOGO. This is going to like alter your purchasing decisions because you have to buy everything in sets of 2. But what ends up happening is like it's buy one, get one 50% off and averages out to 25% off both of them. And so what you can end up doing is you can get a non-eligible item paired up with an eligible item. And so it's kind of like you can use the eligible item as a vehicle to discount the non-eligible item. And so it's kind of like you create the sale. And like you can discount stuff that other people might not be aware of how to discount. And then they have another thing that's like $10 off of $99 or something. And it averages out to like an 8% discount or something like that. And so when you have those two in play, like this is the theoretical maximum profits you can achieve with everything. You're going to have to like recalculate it at time of checkout because if your cart total is like 200, the discount impact's not going to be like 10% anymore. It's going to be like, say, 4%. So like you have to be mindful of like you need to try and get your cart total to as close to 100 as possible. But then like
you're saying there's 5,000 items that you could potentially buy profitably right now at Rack Room Shoes?
Yes. All of these. And so then it's just going to come down to preference.
How long does it take you to create that list? Like when you run all the scans, like how long does that take?
The scan itself for Rack Room Shoes will probably take about 20 minutes. That's getting the raw data, and then ScanUnlimited will probably take like 10 minutes to process it. The hardest part is just waiting for the data. Like it's such a first world problem, just staring at the screen. But like writing the script itself probably took me about 6 hours, but now I never have to do it again. I get set up.
And you wrote the whole script using ChatGPT?
Yeah. I don't know how to write like a line of Python. Like ChatGPT writes everything.
This is awesome.
Oh, it's nuts, dude. That's why like whoever has the most information, like when it's like I have return rate columns, like I can avoid all the stuff that's high. Like, no thanks. Like, it's telling me what to avoid. I love that.
That's
Yeah,
insane.
So how much are you doing per month, like in sales?
Oh, I'm floating around 80,000 right now. I usually average like 1.2 million a year.
Okay, so I mean the bottleneck here is just capital, right? If you
Uh,
just had more money, you could do theoretically way more.
oh yeah, the sky's the limit. The bottom point is me. Like, I'm being the dumb because I don't like buying. In terms of capital that I can command and field is like $600,000. I'm the choke point.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah, so
lazy.
you do have enough capital to kind of deploy, and you do like 500K a month, I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah. If I want to like put myself out there, yeah.
Yeah, you got to
A
get.
lot of it,
Yeah,
a lot of the limitation is knowing which websites to target and are reseller friendly. Provided you solve that and like the manufacturing problem discount, like sky's the limit. You just keep running more data. Like, look at all this stuff. Like, it's nuts. Like I'm not familiar with Brooks as a brand, so I've been hesitant. But like, I only have myself to blame. Like, I can sell it and figure it out and get hard data, or I can just ask the community.
yeah. I think a lot of people that are still selling Amazon are going to find this very. And the one thing I want to tell people, and you are you're a very intelligent guy, you can tell, and also this stuff looks really complicated. But people should know you don't have to be super smart. You don't have to know really anything like this. You just need to know how to prompt ChatGPT with the right stuff. So all this data, this looks cool. It probably is scaring some people off, but it's really not as scary, I think, as people probably make it out to be. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Uh, I like to use the analogy of like the first time I did it was like seeing fire for the first time. But there comes a point where like it just becomes familiar and it's like mundane and routine. It's like, oh, it's supposed to look like that. But a lot of it is like if you've never seen it before, it's just like you can't conceptualize it and like act on it. And so that was like literally the biggest hurdle. It's just like, oh, like that's all coding is? Like, really? That's it?
Yeah. And if it wasn't like that, then there would be no gap. There'd be no skill gap because everybody can do it. So the fact that it even looks difficult and stuff, that is the point, right? That's like the
Yeah, I really like the fact that you were just like, it took me 6.5 hours, and I was like, oh wow. But then you followed it up. It's like, well, I only had to do it once. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people get caught. Would I do 6.5 hours? Well, it's like, well, if you want 5,000 leads in
Yeah.
an
Yeah.
hour or less than an hour, then yeah, you should probably invest that 6.5 hours to figure out how to do that.
That I think that's why the programmers like in society command the salaries that they do because the automation that they introduced to the system. And like it makes total sense when you see it now. And like I'm just some guy, like I'm sure you could wield this way more like powerfully. I'm the choke point. Like I just don't know what else I can do. Like I could schedule it or like write scripts to check like, oh, the sale's gonna start like at 10 a.m. Run the script at 10 a.m. I'm running it manually still.
Have you ever thought about like almost selling that script for like 10 grand or something?
I have, yeah. Some people have approached me, but you run into some issues where there's like if it breaks and they get like irate if they don't have a technical background. This isn't doing what it's supposed to do. But aside from that, like yeah, I'm open to selling them because like the output that it gives you is just nuts, man. Like I can't buy all that stuff even if I wanted to.
It's pretty cool. What else do you want to talk about? Do you have anything else that you wanted to get through today? We've already covered so much stuff, but you never know.
Let's. American Express gave me a line of credit for $120,000. I wasn't very familiar with lines of credit, but what threw me off was that the APR on that was 6%, and so it's 0.5% per month for interest. And like I didn't know that money existed that cheaply because I thought like with interest rates being higher, that like everything was like 12% or more. And like they offered me that, I was like why didn't anyone tell me this, man? Like this is nuts. Like I should have done this way sooner.
Yeah, we don't talk about credit much on here. Me and John aren't big credit guys, but that's probably good for people to hear because a lot of people do. I mean, that is their bottleneck a lot of time.
Yeah. Money's interesting. Because you can get money from people. I don't necessarily recommend it unless you have like this whole thing mastered. Because I've taken some loans from people, and like I'm willing to die, like kill myself in the sense that like I'll bankrupt myself before like I'll like short pay my friend, And so like you want to make sure going in that you know how to handle all this money. And the analogy I like to use, like when anyone's scaling, is that like you have to be comfortable at 10,000 in revenue before you can do 20,000, and like it just keeps scaling at that. The problem is like people want to go straight to like 100K, and I was like, my man, get all your like problems and systems figured out at 10K because everything is gonna get multiplied at 100K. And like a lot of people don't know that until like they're in it, because there's stuff like you just don't know until like it hits.
What are your thoughts on the future of Amazon? It's like been pretty rocky for a lot of people as of late. You're probably one of the most positive people we've had on here. I would say, would you agree, Jim?
Yeah, 100%.
Of the 10 years plus that I've been doing this, I think the one guarantee with Amazon is that change is guaranteed. It's always going to force you to pivot. I like to take comfort in thinking that like it's not just me. Like if they singled me out and said like you're going into Amazon jail, I'd be like real bitter and be like this sucks. But if it's happening to everyone, I take solace in the fact that I know that everyone has to navigate this. And if there's people out there being successful, that at least gives me the assurance that it is possible to navigate and people are still able to thrive. And so that's the other thing with the scraping is that like Nike is getting partially gated because like that partnership. And I'm discouraged because I sell a lot of Nike, but like the scraper is going to just get the whole website and be like, okay, well, just go look over here now and like figure things out. And so you're constantly rotating. I think Soros was the guy that said like his Fridays or something were designated for, I think I phrased it as an exploratory arm of your business. You're always trying a new website because like you don't know when the pay dirt's going to hit, but you have to give yourself that opportunity to at least like hit the dirt and see like this website gives something. And then it can just be like your whole business going forward. Like you'll never know when it's going to hit. You have to give yourself that opportunity. And I think that's where networking comes into play too, because like I like to say like you want to be the first one to give because like the charm of the internet and networking is you never know how it's going to come back to you. Like obviously you want it, but in a negative way, you kind of want to be transactional because you always want to get ahead. But like it doesn't work that way. Like you have to like give first without knowing what you're going to get back. And like, you're usually really well rewarded. Like that SBA loan, like I played an online game during COVID and like some guy told me like, hey, they're doing SBA loans. You should apply for one. Like, had I not talked to that guy that I've never met, like I got the loan. Like that's nuts.
That's crazy.
We usually say, do you have any words of wisdom? But that's probably a good word of wisdom to end on. So do you want to plug anything before we go today?
My Instagram, all my socials are startup FBA. I have a bunch of guides. I should give them to you. If you guys want any guides, I'd be happy to share them because I love writing. I love teaching and stuff. And I kind of want to go in that navigate that route, that pathway. I've seen a lot of coaches come up in the sphere, and like I kind of want to be that person now. I think I'm pretty qualified with 10 years of experience.
For sure.
But yeah, I think that's all I have for everything. Yeah.
Cool. Go follow Tony. Thanks for being here. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Peace.
Thanks for having me. See you guys.
If you enjoyed this episode and know someone else that would enjoy this episode, if you could send them this episode, literally just copy and paste a link, send them on Instagram DM. Everyone loves to network. This is a great way to do it, a very easy way. It helps grow the podcast and get better guests. So the more the podcast gets shared, the more views we get, the better guests we could get for you. We would really